Hey, it's Mr. Johns. Welcome to Virtual Drive number 6. And we are going to talk about the skills test in this lesson. Not a lot of drives we haven't done. We've entered the freeway, we've been on some highway, uh, we've parked, we've um, done lane changes, we've been through roundabouts, lots of controlled intersections, a few two-way and a few four-way and a few uncontrolled intersections, very few, but I think we've pretty much done everything that we needed to practice. Just we need more of it, right? We just barely introduced you to each of those skills. And there's a lot more to driving than just what we've covered in those quick 5 little videos. But let's talk about the skills test because the process of getting licensed includes 2 final tests at the very, very end. And so when you finish the driver's ed class, you will contact the driving school office to schedule your driving lessons. So you set up your 6 hours of driving lessons with whatever works best for you and the driving instructor. Once you finish those 6 hours, they give you your permit. And that permit then becomes something that you can use to practice with another adult. You cannot drive alone. For 6 more months, you have to practice with another licensed adult. If you get caught, you lose that permit, and you have to start all over again, and it goes on your record. So you want to make sure that you follow that to the T, and you use those 6 months to get the practice that you need in all kinds of other scenarios and situations and weather conditions, etc., with a parent or another adult in that passenger seat with you for 6 months. Once you are finished with the 6 months, and it has to be 6 months, also has to be 50 hours minimum. 10 of those hours have to be at night. That's minimum. So 6 months minimum, 50 hours a day, 50 hours of practice, 10 of those at night minimum. And then you will call a skills tester. The thing to do is just look up online Idaho skills testers. There's a few websites that will list all the skills testers in your specific area. I would start calling them and call 1 or 2 until you find someone who's got some openings, and go from there. When you bought your permit, you also paid for a skills test. So they gave you a receipt. You're supposed to save that. I know in our house we taped it to the refrigerator or something for the 6 months, and once the 6 months was up, took it off the refrigerator, went to our skills test, and handed that to the skills tester. There's also an additional small fee, I forget what it is, $12.50 maybe, in cash to that skills tester for his or her time. So once you show up, you actually have to show up with your car or a car. So it has to be a car that is in perfect working condition. You have to have insurance and registration. So make sure you become very familiar with it. All right. So I know, let's just say this is the car that I showed up in, and when I get in with the skills tester, that person is going to ask me to demonstrate that I know where everything is. And so let me show you. This is a brochure, and I'll put the link down below so you can just click on it. By the way, it's also on pages 32 to 37 in the Idaho Driver's Manual, and it'll list everything you need to know about the skills test. Okay, now you're driving with a person you don't know. It's not your driver's instructor. Sometimes it is. There's a few driver's instructors who are also skills testers, but typically a skills tester is just a person. This is all they do all day long. You show up with your car, you pay them, show them your receipt that you paid the DMV, and then you show them your insurance and registration. And then they're going to ask you some questions about the vehicle. So if you look right here in the middle in this blue section, make sure, and I didn't actually do the very good job of this with my own son last time because we forgot to go over this, and I forgot that they will ask you to show them arm signals. Okay, so my son had no clue, which was embarrassing because I should have done a better job with that. So they're going to basically This stuff is funny because it has a little asterisk that says must be functioning. So your driver's door must open. The driver's seatbelt must work. So brake and pedal lights. Brake and pedal lights. Oh, brake lights. Okay, interesting. So brake lights. So he might have you step on the brake while they stand behind and make sure your brake lights work. Make sure all your blinkers work. Make sure your headlights work. So make sure you know where that is. They will take points off if you don't know. Make sure your windshield wipers work and you know where those are. Make sure your hazards work. My son didn't know where that was, and this was on his car that he hadn't driven yet. It's important to know where that little triangle button is that will turn on the flashers. So make sure you know. Your driver's window goes up and down. The horn works. Now arm signals. Okay, so if you're riding a bike, it's the same arm signal. So if you're going to take a right, your left arm goes up. If you're going to take a left, the left arm goes straight out. And if you're going to stop, left arm goes down, down, down. Okay, so it's just the opposite of up, just the opposite of a right turn. So right turn is up, left turn is out, stop is down. They'll ask you to show you that, so make sure you know. Make sure you know where your defroster or defrogger is, okay? And your emergency brake. Make sure you know where that is as well. All right, now once you do that, you will set up, of course, you go through the same thing that you always do in driver's ed. You'll adjust your seat and get comfortable. Because you didn't drive it there. You can't by law. Someone had to drive you there. So then you get the car comfortable for you. You adjust all the mirrors and make sure that the instructor has his belt on as well. And then you just listen to what they tell you to do. So the section over here in yellow tells you what's on the skills test. It's basically divided into 3 categories: driving, parking, and stopping. These are all things that you'll have done for 6 hours in driver's ed, and you've covered in this course as well. And then they have I tried to find it online, but they have a checklist. And so they're paying attention to how smoothly you accelerate, how well you're paying attention. Do you come to a complete stop at a stoplight and sign? Remember, you don't do like, we call it a California stop. Don't just roll through. Make sure you stop all the way. This curb, that means you know that you park 18 inches or closer from the curb without hitting the curb. You slow down gently. You leave an appropriate gap between you and the car in front of you. We've covered that. You know how to stop before a stop line. We've covered that. Lane positions, right? 1 is in the middle, 2 is on the left, 3 is on the right. They may ask you that, but they're probably just paying attention that you can maintain the center of the lane. You give other people the right of way when they deserve it, that you always signal for 5 seconds. Spacing is your following distance, 3 seconds. Speed, that you are able to maintain a safe and legal speed. Steering control, you know how to take mostly corners without cutting into the curb or swinging too wide. Checking traffic, left, right, left, watching for other vehicles, and make sure you don't stop unnecessarily when you don't have to. So those are the things that they will score you on. Now the good news is you can have 12 or fewer mistakes. Now that's pretty forgiving, I think, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of mistakes. Do people fail the skills test? Yes, they do. But you really shouldn't if you've practiced, if you understand the material, you know how to control a vehicle. What I would do and what I did with my son, I'm going to recommend this to you, and if your parents are listening, this is something I highly recommend, is you take the car that you'll be using for the skills test to a parking lot and practice. Perfectly legal to be on private property or a parking lot. And so when I would go, we went to our local middle school and high school on the weekend when no one was there. And we practiced parking and stopping smoothly, starting smoothly, steering and taking, going around corners. We pretty much covered all this stuff except for the arm signals. And that's how we prepared, and it wasn't a problem. So my son was a little nervous like everybody is, but went fine. went fine, as it will for you. So, all right. Critical driving errors, you will fail if you do one of these things. So the other things, you get 12 or less, which no problem. But make sure you don't do any of this stuff, all right? A dangerous action, that could be going down the a one-way street the wrong way. Could be pulling in front of a car on a highway. Anything that's dangerous. Disobeying emergency or safety vehicle, if that comes up. So disobeying a police officer or safety personnel. Disobeying traffic signal or sign. Okay, so that's a big one. Don't run a red light or a sign. You will fail the skills test right away. So really do those things I talked about. You're going to drop your elbows, wiggle your fingers, take a deep breath, and take the big picture in. Make sure you're looking at everything. And those lights and signs, pay attention to those. Don't drive up on a curb or onto the sidewalk. Don't do 5 of the same. So going back to these scored skills, signaling, speed, all that stuff. If you make a mistake in the same category 5 times or more, you fail. So that means if you forget to signal for 5 times, right? If it's not a habit yet, you'll fail. So just make sure it's not really, I mean, that's a lot of times, but you just need to make sure that you signal. You just use the habits that you've started already. Intervention by or disobeys the skills tester. So if the skills tester says turn left here and you don't, or if the skills tester has to grab the steering wheel to help avoid a crash. In driver's ed, we take points off for that, but that's why we're there. We're there to help you. Skills tester is there to make sure you're ready to have a driver's license. And so if they have to do that, you fail. Lane violation, if you're in the wrong lane. Passenger interference. Okay, that's sometimes they allow a parent or a passenger to come along. You have to have a special waiver for that. Sometimes someone needs a translator or something like that, and if that person interferes in some way. Speed, if you're greater than 10 miles an hour or unsafe. So if you're going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit or unsafe, okay, so that could be around a corner, but if you're taking that 15 miles an hour corner, like Mr. Johns' students do, no problem. So they always know my students because you guys know what you're doing when you show up. Street curb parking, 18 inches. Wow, that's a critical, they call it. So that's interesting. If you park further than 18 inches from a curb, that's a fail. So that's interesting. So, I usually swing in pretty close to the curb and then just pull out a little bit. So I'm usually about 6 to 10 inches or 12 inches from the curb, something like that. And remember, my tip was to park kind of right where the gutter starts, where the pavement meets the gutter, and that's usually about 12 inches away from the curb, and you're pretty safe right about there. And if you strike an object, don't hit something. So that's what the skills test is all about. When you pass, you will be given, they'll tell you you passed. They won't tell you your score. Maybe some people will tell you, but if you pass, they'll give you a sealed envelope, and that sealed envelope has your results in it. And you will take that to the DMV and take the computer test, the written test they call it. In smaller places, it's still a written test. But in most places, it's on the computer. And you can miss, I believe you can miss 6 on that test. Do people fail that? Yes, more than they fail the skills test. So make sure you know the stuff. I would study honestly, I would study the I'm having a hard time getting into the I would study the Idaho Driver's Manual. That is all that you need to study for that state test, because they don't have access to my course. They just use the Idaho Driver's Manual. for their material. It's multiple choice. It's pretty common sense, but there are always a few that there's a few questions that throw people. You just have to memorize some things. And so I can tell you off the top of my head, I know that they're going to ask you about school buses. When do you start? When do you have to stop? And so just know if there's 2 lanes going in both directions, you always have to stop for a school bus that's stopped. If it's, I said that wrong. Let me back up. Just the opposite. I just caught myself. If there's 2 or more lanes, so let me fix what I just messed up. If there's 2 or more lanes going both directions, if you're in the opposite side, if you're on the opposite side of the school bus that's stopped and loading students or unloading students, you do not have to stop. If there's 2 or more lanes in both sides, both directions. But if it's 3 lanes or 2 lanes, you always have to stop no matter what, okay? So just think of it this way. A school bus driver is never going to stop and let students cross 4 lanes of traffic to get to a neighborhood on the other side of the street, okay? But they will let students cross 3 lanes or 2 lanes of traffic. And sometimes students do. They go either in front of the school bus across the street, or they just get off the bus and go to their neighborhood that's right there. So hopefully I didn't mess you up there, but just think that through. If there's 2 or 3 lanes, you stop no matter what, no matter which direction you're going, and there's a school bus. But if it's a 4-lane road, which is a pretty busy road, the opposite traffic does not have to stop, okay? So usually I think of like, one thing that confuses people is a 3-lane road. Now 3-lane, what I mean by that is a 2-lane road with a turn lane. That's really common where I live. There'll just be a road going in both directions and then a turn lane where people can pull in to turn. All right, that's considered a 3-lane road. You have to stop. You have to stop no matter what, either side, okay? So the other thing, I know there's questions on when to turn off your brights. If you're driving on a highway, and you have your brights on and you come up behind a car, how far back do you have to turn your brights off? Now, I'm going to let you look that one up. I'm just telling you what's on the test. And then there's another question just like it. So if you miss one, you probably miss the other. And that is if it's at night and your brights are on and you come around a corner and there's a car coming at you, which is even more dangerous because that could be a head-on collision if you're blinded by headlights or you're blinding them. How far back do you have to turn off your brights? That's just turn them down to like dims, normal, right? So that's 2 questions that people miss. So make sure you memorize those numbers. I'm going to challenge you to go look those numbers up and write them down. Have a little cheat sheet so you can study before you go take that test. I can tell you, I know the question that people miss: school buses, and then those 2 questions on when to turn off their brights. Most of it is common sense. Beyond that, I think that questions are fairly simple. Sometimes the wording is confusing. So you have to think it through before you just take the first answer that sounds right. Like, you want to really think it through. But just study the Idaho Driver's Manual. There'll be some signs you'll have to recognize. Obviously, different laws. So I would say, and this is what I've recommended all my career, read the manual 3 times, all the way through, 3 times, front to back. I think that's something that will set you up for success, because by the 3rd time you're like, yeah, I've already read this. I know. That's the whole point, right? You don't want to just kind of flip through it on the way to the test and hope you're going to remember this stuff. But anyway, I hope that helps. And my job is to make sure you're ready to show up for your first drives. So make sure you know the stuff and you impress those driving instructors by knowing 5-second signal, 3-second following distance, 18 inches from a curb, all those things. Again, they're usually impressed with students from this course because we show up and we know those things. So please be one of those students. I take pride in that. And then I'm also trying to help prepare you for the state test, the written and the skills test, 6 months down the road. And I'm always here. If you have questions about any of the material, get a hold of me and I'll help you out. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. And that is the final virtual drive. I know we didn't drive. What are you saying, Mr. Johns? Why do you call this a virtual drive? Well, we went to our skills test and we passed. Woohoo! So good job. For now, Mr. Johns out.